Hey 3DMJers, this is Andrea Valdez, and you're listening to the 3D Muscle Journey podcast. Today you're going to hear Jeff Alberts and Eric Helms tell you about how to prepare an athlete for the end of their competition season. Whether you're a coach who's guiding clients or a competitor who's trying to finish the year strong, you'll take a lot from this episode. And you'll probably be surprised at how early we start planning a comp season exit and what all goes into that. So definitely stick around till the end. Before we get into that, I'd like to remind you all that our newly released Vault VIP membership just launched for $8.99 a month. For that super low price, you can get all access to every video course we've ever made in the 3DMJ Vault. That includes the lifting library, transitioning away from tracking, the Godfather's Guide to Posing, the Fat Loss Q&A collection, and 8 other courses right now. We're also releasing a new course in October. I'm talking to you guys in September of 21, but we're releasing another course before the end of next month and a lifting library update in December. And all of that will be included as well. Like once you buy, you're locked in at that monthly price and we'll get every future course automatically. As with everything we release in the vault, as it grows, the price will increase. So the earlier you buy, the more money you save. You can sign yourself up for a free account at 3dmjvault.com just to give it all a try and see if you like our video learning platform before becoming a VIP member. Again, that's 3dmjvault.com. Thanks so much for checking it all out and enjoy the rest of the show.
Jeff, I'm excited about this conversation with you because it's one of the things that we talk about. Well, every time we have a contest prep client, we talk about it with them. But it's one of the things we definitely don't focus on a lot in terms of the community on like the conversations we have, and that's specifically like the coaching that goes around how do we prepare someone for transitioning out of prep. So how do we deal with the end of prep? And of course, you know, listeners are maybe thinking about, the recovery diet or, eating up. Not necessarily that stuff, but just how do we reflect and learn from that process? So yeah, I know for me, when I was, coaching prep athletes a lot more regularly, I kind of had a number of things going through my head as we approached the final show. And a lot of it was driven by the fact that I know when I was prepping myself back in like 2007, when I was mostly self-prepped in, say, 2011, the hardest thing for me was to think about the other side because you get so focused on getting leaner, hitting macros, focused on your food, focused on your posing routine, competing, placing the way you want to, that I feel like one of the benefits that's not often talked about having a prep coach is that they can actually help you think about what's coming next, and because your vision narrows so much. So anyway, what is that something, do you agree with that it's very difficult for athletes to think about, the other side when they're deep into prep?
Oh yeah. If you think about it, I mean, you're hyper-focused. And I think if I would have taken myself back to, let's say, last year or the year before prepping athletes, it was always like a lot of attention towards the end of the season, especially that last show, like you said, like, okay, I need to bring up the recovery process, get them to embrace it, to accept, let's say, higher body fat levels and just prepare them for what's to come. But this year, actually, I've done less of that. And, I think the reason I'm doing that is because I'm noticing like towards the end of the season, like everything, especially the last show, like you really want to nail down your conditioning, your everything. You just want to be perfect on stage. There's a lot of stressors involved with that. So by like, let's say having a heavy conversation based on recovery, it's almost like you're throwing more fuel to the fire, if you will. So what I've really done in a sense is start that conversation a lot sooner. So right out the gates, like that first encounter with an athlete, like, hey, we're setting up your prep. This is what it's going to kind of look like. This is our goal. This is where we need to be as far as weight, how long it's going to take us to get there. And also, have a small conversation around, okay, this is what we're going to do after the fact. Like, we need to recover. We need to put body fat on. Performance needs to go up. We need to get you ready for the next go round. But of course, smell the roses first before you focus too much on the following show, the following year or 2 years or what have you. But I think I want to kind of alleviate as much stress as possible towards the end. And I want like one less thing off their plate. So it's like, if you start that communication a lot sooner, I think it's putting together a better process, if you will.
Yeah, I think that's just good teaching, really. Like, if the first time I heard about the recovery diet process was when I'm freaked out about my final show's peak week, even if you did it like, let's say 4 weeks in advance, and I'm maybe not freaked out about the peak week, but if I've been dieting, say 20, 24 weeks, and you're like, oh, by the way, here's what we're going to do after your last show, I think that would be an added stressor. But if you were to talk to me, like the first time we touched base, which ideally, as everyone knows who listens to our podcast, or our coaching requests for how to do it ideally, is you come to us in the off season far in advance. So if you're talking to me the first time I meet you, but hey, I want to do a show in 2022, can we start an off season now here in September of 2021? And Coach Jeff is like, yeah, absolutely. Here's the game plan, like big picture. We're gonna be in a surplus, put on some size, or we're gonna start a diet in March. By the way, prep, it's probably going to take 6 months. So we'll be competing at the end of the year, and then we'll do a couple shows depending on what's available in your area. And then we're going to have the recovery diet. Oh, what's the recovery diet, Coach? X, Y, and Z, right? And in that way, I'm not going to have this, added stressor thrown at me when I'm in a very, let's say, mentally fragile state.
Everything's fragile at that point.
Absolutely. Yeah. Not even just mentally. So yeah, no, I think that's really important. Having kind of that, a little bit of foresight. I think this is especially important as well for first-time competitors. This is something Andrea's talked about a lot, is that as hard as prep can be, for first-time competitors, one of the hardest things is transitioning back to the off-season, because you've drastically changed your relationship with food, your body, you've entered a new competitive sport, but you really don't know what's coming when you try to then become a normal human again. And it just doesn't go well for a while. We've all talked about our individual struggles, so we don't need to rehash that. But they're certainly not isolated incidents. That's something that's very normal. So not only is it important for a coach to like, hey, we're plateaued. We've been dieting 8 weeks. We're going to make these type of changes. We'll probably break the plateau. Here's the timeline, because they've never been this lean before. So giving them that foresight and a little bit of expectation can alleviate some insecurity. But I think that's something you have to keep doing, even though the contest season's about to end, because knowing that you're going to be nonstop hungry for at least a month, no matter how much you eat or how much body fat you gain to some degree, is not something that anyone's typically ever experienced before. And like I said, kind of the preamble is that it's very difficult to look too far ahead in the future when you're super hyper-focused and neurotic. So yeah, that's really good stuff, Jeff. Kind of setting them up in advance to talk about these topics. One thing that we were talking about, go ahead.
But with a first-time athlete too, it's like, as a coach, you have to kind of know how far you can push someone. So you have to, like, if you're a month out from a show and they're like, hey, I'm super hungry, you just have all those adverse reactions to a prep. And if you push them even harder, not only is it going to, in a sense, make it more painful in the moment, but then you have to weigh, okay, what's this transition going to be like after the prep is over? Because obviously, if you're digging someone more into a hole, it's going to be easier to basically just turn off a bodybuilding switch at the end and just, basically the chains come off. Mm-hmm. And that's where you see like the big rebounds, the big 20-pound weight swings in a week or two. Yeah. So as a coach, you have to know how to throttle, especially a first timer. Like you want them to come back for more down the road. You don't want it to make it an enjoyable experience. Yes, it's going to be hard. Yes, it's going to be challenging. That's part of the enjoyment, part of the fun, the challenge. But you don't want to make it so extreme that, it's starting to become a little on the unhealthy side. So that's something you have to weigh out as well.
Absolutely. Every push you make is pushing against a rubber band, and how hard you have to push, the further you have pushed it, increases how much recoil you're going to get when you go back into the off season. So I think that's something that it's difficult to conceptualize if you've never been there before. So 100% true for first-time competitors. Something we were talking about, I'm going to say off camera, but I guess it's before we started recording, is that our athletes seem to be more aware of the concept of the recovery diet. Circa 2016 or whatever, it was definitely the case where we would have to get some buy-in. We'd have to explain to them why we're not doing the reverse diet, why it's better for health, all that good stuff. The track record and our anecdotal experiences with it, both with ourselves and our clients. But the fortunate thing now is we've been doing this for more than 5 years, and it seems like you don't have to explain that as often, which leaves the door open to discussing other things, to enable reflection on the prep in a way that isn't impeded by, like you said, that added stressor of going, oh, okay, so we're shifting gears and we're doing something that, while better, quote unquote, than a very strict reverse diet, still requires me entering new territory, can be a little scary, probably might have some element of tracking, some level of accountability. Sure, we increase your calories by 1,800 and cut your cardio in half, but still tracking is a stressor in and of itself, even if you are tracking, 1,800 more calories, even loosely. So I think there are some really good conversations to be had there when that is not something that you have to alleviate the fear of. And I think it opens the door to being able to reflect on, hey, what did we learn? What things could we have done differently? How do you think this is going to affect your life moving forward? What do you think about competitive bodybuilding generally? How is this going to mesh with your life? Which things fell off? Hey, let's reconnect with your family. All this stuff that I think just to reiterate, how much it's difficult to see it when you're in prep, how much your vision narrows, how much you get this tunnel vision, how much the horse blinders are on.
Oh, yeah.
But if you stay in good communication with your coach, and again, another plug for coming to us in the off season, if the coach remembers what you were like when you were not insane in the off season, what things you focused on, how regularly you talked about your family. Oh, I'll say it. I'm happy to say it, right? Because stuff happens. Like you'll share, hey, my son's doing this, and I was playing this game. I was playing basketball with my friends, or you have a life, and then all of a sudden, all you start hearing from your athlete is stuff related to bodybuilding and food in the middle of prep, and concern about whether they have a new glute striation or things like that. That's something you probably aren't aware of, but your coach, if they're doing a good job and if they've been paying attention, and they remember the version of you that was not starved, they can help you remind you of that stuff. So yeah, I think that's something that's critical.
Oh, for sure. I just had an athlete today check in. He's about 4 weeks out, and the pressure's mounting, right? We're 4 weeks out, first time competitor, feels like he's behind. So there's a little bit of, sense of urgency and anxiety. So basically, the response wasn't so much protocol based. It was just trying to get him to calm those nerves. And just to give him perspective, like, hey, the first time we Skyped, do you remember that conversation? The insecurities about even attempting to compete and how your physique looked then. And then now look where you're at. And I've done like multiple Skype posing sessions with him, and, taking a snapshot on there and then showing it back to him. He's like, whoa, that's me. I'm like, exactly. Yeah, you're looking great. But the sense of urgency, the time is kind of dwindling down. He wants to do well. It's all good, though. Those are all good feelings to have, because that means you care and there's urgency to make progress. That's how you do make progress. But at the same time, we don't want that to rob him of the actual enjoyment of the process. So again, throwing, hey, by the way, when the show's over with, we need to really get on the recovery diet. Like, yes, we do. But at the same time, we don't want so much restriction, if you will, in a sense, to where he can't reflect, like you're saying. Like, he's just spending more energy on, I got to be, kind of perfect with this process. So there needs to be, whether it's a day, a week, 2 weeks, whatever, like a time where you can actually, just sit back and reflect on the journey and see all the positives that came out of it, outside of just like, hey, I shredded. There's a lot of good feedback and takeaways from it.
I really like that you emphasized having the athlete reflect back to where they started and how far they've come. Because like you just said, Jeff, a lot of our athletes, especially competitive bodybuilders, but this applies to athletes in many sports, I think, they get so focused on progress and improvement. And like you said, getting everything perfect, that they often aren't able to appreciate how far they've come. And this is the nature of comparison, right? As soon as you advance to a new level, now you're comparing yourself to a higher level. I squatted 500 pounds. Awesome. How long till I hit 600? How much appreciation is there for 500? Just as much as you had when you had 400, because you were trying for 500 and now you're trying for 600. So, and that's not necessarily a problem per se. I'm not saying you shouldn't always push to get better. But what I am saying is that most people don't reach their potential because they get frustrated and burned out with the level of focus, attention, and striving that they put forth without being able to appreciate it. So if you always feel the same as when you could barely squat 225, even when you're squatting 315, 405, 495, the issue is not like great, yeah, I'm never satisfied, I'm always trying to progress, but you do have to be able to acknowledge how far you come, or you won't appreciate it and then you'll burn out and stop trying. When you become so frustrated with the process that you won't keep putting forth the effort to improve, you've now thrown the baby out with the bathwater. So I think it does take sometimes someone who has that objective eye, who has been focusing on your progress without that same emotional attachment to yourself that you have, like a coach, to say, yo, you have drastically changed your physique. You've made incredible progress. No, you're not as good as the pros right now. And even when you get your pro card, there will be pros who are better than you. And even when you win your first pro show, there's still going to be world champions. But let's focus on how far you've come, revitalize those batteries so you can keep pushing forward. Because that's just one of the hardest things to do, especially for highly motivated and competitive athletes. It's kind of that catch-22.
Yeah, it's pretty much for this athlete. It's like, okay, today, this is the best you've ever been. And you're basically like, his execution's pretty much flawless. So I'm like, tomorrow, you're going to be better than today. But the perspective is like, oh shit, I got 4 weeks. I might be up against some shredded freaks. So, he's already looking too far ahead instead of staying in the moment. And that's where the stressors creep in, the anxieties keep in. And then the focus turns to that as opposed to like actually seeing how far you've come, like you said, and just the actual enjoyment of the process. You just lose sight of that. And in the end, I mean, that's what we're all about, right? Like we're trying to enjoy, in a sense, a hobby. This is most people's hobby. Even me, this is still a hobby after 35 years. And if I talk about myself, I can take myself back to in my 20s when I competed 3 years straight. Man, I just got burned out. I was so robotic for 3 years. Eventually, I mean, just you burn out. And that's what ended up happening. So like 2 or 3 year stretch where it was just like, man, I didn't really care about competing at all. Like I had no interest in it. And my poor ex-wife is like, man, this guy's retired from bodybuilding like 20 times just because I've been, yes, it's either an on-off switch. So yeah, I think that's pretty important that we have someone who, like you said, who has a more of an objective eye and can speak through different lenses and perspectives.
It's funny, Jeff, in other sports, being a quote unquote clutch player is about maintaining your focus and your attention when you're in a bad position, when there's a lot of chips on the line. You're up to bat, your team's down by a few points, and you've got a runner on base. If you do really well right now, you could potentially tie up the game. Or it's a boxing match, you're down on points, there's only a few rounds left. Do you get crazy and start throwing haymakers, or do you stay focused and make the right plays and let them make a mistake? And that happens in a matter of minutes and quarters, sometimes in real sports. But in bodybuilding, it happens over the course of weeks and months. Like you said, if this guy's execution is perfect and he's doing everything right and he's improving and every day he's at his best, but if he allows the stressor of thinking about the what ifs and the comparisons to people who ultimately he has no control over if they show up or how well they do to get in his head, all of a sudden he has some days where he's not at his best, or he's so focused on that the stress gets the better of him. His sleep gets worse. His performance gets worse. He just starts looking watery because he's always stressed all the time. And all of a sudden he starts worrying about variables that didn't need to be worried about. So I think if we're looking for the parallel between a clutch athlete in a game, as we're watching it and we watch, okay, this is the moment where he can either, or she can either fall apart or bring the heat and change the game. The equivalent of that is being able to be in that position for months as an athlete while you're kind of losing your shit. So I think this is something that, while we haven't talked about it before, I think is really critically important, because sometimes, and I can speak for myself, in 09 specifically, I was gunning for my pro card, and every show I did, I had these chances, and I placed second like a record number of times in one season. And as I got closer to my final show, I was getting more and more importance put on that. Like, this is my last shot to get my pro card, And I had a similar experience with the Mayhem. I the first 2 shows I did of the season, unfortunately, not enough people showed up for me to even have a shot at it. So the Mayhem comes, and I know this is my last shot, and I had so much stress around, doing well in that competition, and then even just figuring out, do I want to do another pro qualifier? And all I really needed to do is just execute and see where the chips fell. But I was wrestling with that narrative that I had created of putting more importance on it because it's my last quote unquote shot. Is it my last shot? No, I'm not dying. Like, I'm still going to be competing. I have more time, but it was very difficult to keep that front of mind. So I think, and again, this is something that Berto was very helpful in being in my corner, helping me reflect on those types of things.
What's interesting is that was your best ever, by far. Mm-hmm. And I think prior to that last show, you were pretty even keeled. I don't think you got too high and you didn't get too low. You were like right in the middle, as cool as the other side of the pill, like Alberto likes to say. Mm-hmm. So that's why I actually told this gentleman, I'm like, we got to keep you in the middle ground, because you get too high, you get too low. It just zaps so much energy. And I could even say, like, when I'm training, even within a set, it gets hard. I try not to let my emotions run. Like, my anxieties crank up when it's getting hard. Like, I try to stay as cool as I can, because I just tend to perform better without a lot of outside stressors going on. But yeah, like I mean, you took second, but it was by far the best we've ever seen you. And I mean, look at, even if, let's say you did get your pro card back in 2011, what do you think you would have did with it? Like you said, you would have gone to the next level, and then the second probably wouldn't have been second. It probably would have been second to last.
Yeah, competing against the pros, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So then you throw another monkey into the wrench. Now your anxieties are even higher, because now you're like, okay, I'm not doing well at all anymore. But perspective is you remove all the competitions. It's like, shit, you just keep getting better.
Yep, 100%. Yeah, and it's so, yeah, I think when I think about the conversations I have with my athletes, it is very different depending on how many competitions they've done, and of course their individual context. If we're talking about a first-time competitor, I'm going to talk them through, the posing rounds and what they can expect on game day, and how there may or may not be an expediter backstage helping you get out there. And do you have someone to help you put tanner on your lower back and your glutes and the areas you can't reach? Like, do they have a spray tanner there? Do they have a good reputation? Like all this kind of stuff, of course. And the more you can prepare an athlete for those things, then the more they're going to be able to quote unquote stay in the pocket, and be cool as the other side of the pillow, as we just said. But I think that doesn't end once you've now got a second, third, or even fourth or fifth time competitor. You just get to tailor it more to their needs. And you can focus in on, okay, what does this person lose sight of during the process of prep? I'm thinking of a number of my competitors, because I have the benefit these days of I pretty much only work with a very small select few of athletes who I've worked with for, sometimes more than a decade in some cases. Can you believe that? That's nuts. And they don't need to be reminded about the difference between a 2-show format or a run-through format show. They don't need to be reminded about making sure someone's there to put color on them. But they do need to perhaps remember that it's not just about qualifying for the next thing, or, hey, we don't need to dot these I's and cross these T's. In fact, when we've done that previously, it just adds a little more stress. We need to focus on X, Y, and Z. And I think that's something where it really requires the coach to pay attention. and to really develop a relationship and rapport with the athlete, and to ask questions that maybe make them a little uncomfortable. Not only you, but also potentially the athlete. Like, how's your relationship with your family been? How's your job performance? Are you still getting out and doing things? You know, what has fallen off on the wayside? And also, was it worth it? Because I think people sometimes misunderstand us here at 3DMJ when we talk about balance. I'm not expecting someone to maintain exactly the same life and just get shredded and, you know, just take it on the chin and be like, no, the only person I'm going to let see my suffering is the inside of me and no one else. No, the reality is that it will affect those around you. We control that as much as we can, and we make sure that it happens on your terms. You have to be okay with whatever sacrifices are made. But if you lose sight and lose awareness and aren't able to focus on those things, you don't get to know if you're okay with it in the moment. You get to find out when you're sane again how much you let go during prep.
I think like, yeah, because this, I have one athlete, first time competitor, different guy, and very communicative. Like his check-ins were great. Like he was communicating not just like what's going on with him personally, but those around him. And let's face it, sometimes contest prep affects the people around us more so than the actual athlete themselves. So, you know, going through 8, 9, 10 months of seeing how this prep impacted like everything, like himself and people around him, part of the recovery process was just in fact that, like, hey, you know, he's going to take a week and go on vacation, take his better half somewhere, because there was a lot of sacrifice from his better half for him to do what he's doing. So that's a lot of sacrifice, you know, to ask someone. So, you know, for a coach to say, you know what, bro, you need to be, you know, we need to rehearse diet and only have, you know, 25 more grams of carbs this week, like right after a show. That just, it makes no sense physically, but it makes zero sense from the real life perspective. It's not fair to someone who's basically sacrificed their life for 8 or 9 months to now like, oh shit, okay, I still can't do anything because this guy's still tracking his macros to the T after the show's over with. So that's another aspect to the recovery process, is not just with our bodies, but I think also with the social dynamic.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts there?
I 100% agree. And it makes me think about how I have given recovery diet advice in two very different ways. Not even two, multiple different ways. Like if someone is single, competed multiple times, held it together relatively well, it might be, like I said earlier, hey, we're going to go up 1,800 calories. We're just going to worry about calories and protein. We're going to weigh in only 3 days a week. Feel free to eat out, just eyeball it and estimate it, and cut your cardio in half. However, someone who is in the position you're talking about, it's a, hey, enjoy your week-long vacation. Try not to gain more than, say, 5% of your body weight. And it's not that I'm trying to put restrictions on them. It's that if they're gaining more than 5% of their body weight, I know they weren't on vacation with their family. They were on vacation with restaurants. You know what I'm saying?
Vacation with the refrigerator, huh?
Yeah, there was no conversations being had during dinner because you always had some shit in your mouth. Or the only conversations you had was, hey, honey, are you going to finish that? You know?
Yeah.
So I think it is important to, you know, sometimes like Brad would say, like, encouraging our athletes to pretend to be normal, like have 3 square meals, you know?
Yeah.
Believe it or not, sometimes just telling someone only have 3 eating occasions in a day can be a challenge to adhere to after a show.
Yeah. That would be, I think, for me, like I'm sure he puts more instruction to it, but I mean, yeah, if it's just, hey, 3 square meals, I'm like, well, does that mean 2,000 calories at this meal and 4,000 at the next one? But yeah, I'm not saying, hey, a week vacation, the handcuffs come off, like, you know, basically what I'd like to talk about is decision making and maybe flexibility. Like, okay, you know, you're going on vacation, you know, most of the time you're probably going to be more social in the evening. So let's keep things cool during the day, keep it on the lighter side. That way you have a lot of wiggle room in the evening, enjoy more food, a couple drinks or whatever. And, you know, you're not going to, you know, basically create too many issues there. Yeah. But, and then usually it's like, okay, once they have that week where, you know, they kind of did the vacation thing, then it's like, okay, let's talk again and let's set up a big picture game plan. and set up some guidelines like, hey, by X date, let's try to cap your weight here. So you put some accountability in there.
Yes.
And that goes a long ways. And the protocol could be very different for each individual as far as like the details to that. But big picture, I think, is so important when you're basically coming out of a prep.
Yeah, and I think step one for a coach when you're starting to think about what are some accountability and pieces or guidelines or boundaries that you want to set for nutrition or training targets or weight gain targets or what have you for that period, the first thing you want to think about is, do I believe this athlete has a very high probability of being able to do this? And I would say even if you're like 70% chance they'll follow this, too high risk. Because the consequence in this mental state of not being able to hit it for many is to go all the way to the other side because they're in this very black and white mindset. It's very different from what they were just doing. They have been very neurotic. They were very restricted. So I would prefer to take a maybe too aggressive approach, have someone gain more weight than I'd want, give them less restriction. If I think it's a 90% chance of them being able to follow it, then something that might be better, even if it's 70 or 80%. I don't know if you feel the same way, Jeff.
Yeah, for sure. No doubt. Oftentimes what ends up happening is if you put too much restriction or you set limits too low, let's say on calories or what have you, most of the time people are going to overeat that.
Yep.
And when they overeat that, okay, physically you'll gain weight or whatever, but mentally it's harder to accept because now you feel like, shit, I'm getting fatter and I'm eating more than the coach is saying I'm supposed to eat. So now I think I'm doing something wrong. So it turns into like a vicious cycle. Like, okay, they'll do this too, like without me knowing. The next day, oh shit, I ate 1,000 calories more than I should have or whatever. Okay, now I'm going to slash it back down, way down and cut it. And then now we got this vicious cycle going, tug of war, if you will. So I would rather like set the calories much higher. And even if the weight goes up a little quickly, like eventually you're going to settle. Because if the calories are set high enough, then they're not going to be overeating as much.
Mm-hmm.
So,
100%.
Yeah.
And those are things that you can, prepare your athlete for as well. And I think this is like when I think about the checklists of how do I onboard a contest prep athlete, just like you said, Jeff, I'm going to talk about it. First contact point. If I know they're going to get on stage with me, even if and preferably if we're starting in the off season, I'm going to tell them about the game plan and the purpose of each phase. Don't need to give them the X's and O's at that point. And then when we get closer to each one of those phases, they get a little more insight into the X's and O's on a medium picture size. And then they're actually going to get the spreadsheet. And they're actually going to see the email instructions or me talk about it in a video in much more detail. And I think not only do you want to provide information on what to do, but also why to do it. So if they understand for the purpose of the recovery diet is to relatively quickly put back on body fat and recover. And then we say things, you should also say things like, okay, so a decent chance, we're going to have this plan and you're going to overeat on one day, or you might even experience a binge eating episode. A, that's normal, but B, that's okay. And C, we don't need to do anything about that.
Exactly.
Shout out to my man, Ted Lasso, who says, we're going to be like a goldfish because they supposedly, I don't even think this is true, only have a 10-second memory. So we're going to be like goldfish. We're just going to forget this happened and move back to it because it's normal, it's okay, and we move along. And also shout out to Andrea for getting me to watch Ted Lasso because we binge watched it and we're already caught up already. Fantastic show. Jeff, you'd like the show too. I actually guarantee it. But anyway, I think you want to make someone aware of not only like what are we trying to do and why we're doing it, but also how do we deal with the almost inevitable pitfalls and what do we not want to do in those situations. I think those are all important aspects of what you want to talk to your athlete about, rather than just giving like, here's a spreadsheet, here's the plan for the recovery. That's a great start, but that shouldn't be all of it.
Yeah. Well, you have to expect imperfection because none of us are perfect. And it's like you said, I mean, if you overeat 3 or 4 days after a show and all of a sudden you took in 2,000, let's say you took in 4,000 calories, coach wants you to eat 3,000, it's normal. I mean, your body fat is so extreme. Like I always just go back to my caveman analogy because it makes the most sense to me. It's like if you've been starving for months on end, slowly but surely, and all of a sudden you're like, oh shit, there's like a big ass dinosaur, and you take it down, like you're not just gonna nibble a knuckle off of it. You're gonna eat until you're stuffed because you don't want to die, basically. So I try to normalize it in a sense, but not like, hey, we want to try not to do that too often because hey, you're well fed now, we're good. So let's go back to that calories that I said let's stick to, or hey, let me even increase it 500 if I feel like they would adhere to that a little bit better. So it's hardly ever will I say this guy overate, now I'm going to reduce calories down because now we're post show. I don't want him to get fat too fast.
Yeah.
Because again, it's just going to create those vicious cycles.
For sure.
And this is something I've learned too from the reverse dieting. Yeah, from the reverse diet. This is from prior to recovery diet when we were trying to do the reverse dieting thing. And I just remember like, man, we just 9 out of 10 athletes are failing. I'm like, that's why when our meeting, I'm like, hey, this is a problem. We need to really address this. Yeah.
100%. Yeah. It's, you really don't want to set up your athletes for failure. And I think this is tough because like, and not just the recovery thing, but there's a lot of moving pieces. I think knowing how to present all the important pieces of what goes into the final aspects of prep requires a coach knowing how not to overload the athlete with information. So I have a number of things I think of doing. Like when we're 4 weeks out from any show, I start talking about the peak week process at the 4 week mark. When we're 3 weeks out, I start talking about what are we going to do like literally on game day? What's that going to be like? And, are we going to celebrate that night? Are we going to celebrate the whole weekend? What does that structure look like? Because we may or may not have more shows. If it's the last show, it'll look very different. That'll be the introduction to the recovery diet. And then what's the game plan post-show for moving on to the next show? Or if it's the last show again, that would be the recovery diet. So you've got the prep for the show itself. You have the recovery diet. But then you also have everything else we were talking about. Like how do we start reflecting? What's the off-season game plan for training? And what is our long-term goals as an athlete? So do you drop one 30-minute video on them? Probably not. Like Jeff said, this is something like I think it's not a bad idea for all you younger coaches out there. Have a checklist of all the things that you want to talk to your athletes about. This can be like start very general. And you can have like, emotional aspects, cultural aspects, like social aspects is what I mean there. Things that, are specific to this person. And they can just be placeholders. And then when you have a specific athlete, you can go, like we need to talk about, work-life balance, or we need to talk about, family and relationships, or having a social life that went away, whatever, is specific to that person in those spots. But I would definitely recommend, because there are so many things, is actually having that list, having that checklist, and then writing down, okay, in a typical 24-week prep, at what point do I want to bring these up? How, and to what detail, and what are important points? That helps me when I think about it. So I know that we're going to talk about the recovery diet. I know we're going to talk about potentially, actually, this is something that Andrea suggested we bring up on this, eating up into a show. So for those who recall, we recently had a discussion that was around a specific athlete, by the way, who was striving to achieve truly elite conditioning, making the shredded look less shredded with how shredded this shredded man is. Dirk, shout out. And we've had a number of questions now, both at our team Instagram account and from individual athletes of, hey, am I going to be eating up? Hey, is it time for me to eat up? And I think the reality is that while eating up into a show is ideal, you're getting ready, 2 to 6 weeks early and you get to increase your calories. The ideal doesn't happen very often. That's why it's ideal. It is great if we can get there, but most often, especially for first or second time competitors, they just need to get lean. Or we need to get them as lean as we think we can without pushing that rubber band too far and snapping back into a place we don't want to go to. So I think you shouldn't expect to eat up. And you should also evaluate, are you excited by the prospect of eating up because it's improving your performance, or because you get to eat more food? And it's okay if it's both, but you want to make sure that at least some aspect of that second element is there, and not just, I'm leanish. Do I get to have more food? I'm sure it'll be great, because I know that's something that is, of course, an unavoidable motivator at a certain point in prep. But just recall that the controversy around Dirk eating up was because he was already looking shredded and people thought that it would be too long. That's how lean this guy is. So yeah, that's kind of the a situation that is unfortunately rare. I wish everyone would get diced and crazy looking with time to eat up, but it simply is not always the norm.
Well, yeah, the reality is that everyone's different and everybody has a different adherence level. Some people adhere really good, they're robotic and they're perfect. And like, okay, and if the coach can time things right from the get-go, like, hey, this is the big picture plan and everything's mapped out, perfect world. Okay, yeah, we're eating up. You know, you got a good 2, 3, 4, 5 week stretch where you're eating up. Great. But the reality is some people binge, you know, or some people have vacations or whatever the case may be. There's always like context with every single prep. And sometimes it just doesn't work out that way. So you just, like you said, the goal is just to get as lean as you possibly can without looking too stringy and flat. And even, I mean, you've probably had athletes like this, Eric, where you've pushed them as far as you could to the end. And then you had 2-3 days, maybe you're like, okay, I'm backloading them and they fill out and they look great.
Mm-hmm.
So there's nothing that's eating up. If you think about it, it's a short term, I'm eating up. But
Yeah,
obviously you don't want to be severely depleted where you just can't get yourself filled out. But it's just the real world is not everybody's going to be like Dirk. That's pretty rare, especially for someone who's doing it for the first time, first time competitor. Like if you could get them in some pretty good conditioning and they don't lose their shit and their family's intact, they're intact, they're emotionally intact, then I think that's a huge success. Especially 100%. If they say, Coach, that was awesome and I want to do it again next time.
Absolutely.
You're doing it right.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with that. And I think an important part of that is being able to reflect on the positives. So a lot of what we talked about thus far has been letting people know that there's going to be backsliding, pitfalls, challenges related to the recovery diet, managing anxiety around the peak week, the competition, the changes, helping them realize the things that they might have let fall off. The conversation we've had thus far, Jeff, has been very solution-oriented and predicting potential obstacles so that we can overcome them. And that's great. That does need to happen. And I know we spend a lot of time on the 3DMJ podcast talking about how hard contest prep, how hard the transition is, and all the potential negatives. And that's just because we want people to have like informed consent before they decide to do shows. But that's not to say, like, there is some reason why all of us crazy people keep competing. So I think it is easy to lose sight of those positive things. So Jeff, talk to me about how you help your athletes reflect on and fully benefit from the lessons that can be learned from prep, and what does that look like for you as a coach?
I think that depends on the athlete themselves. Yeah, really. Like I don't have a general way of doing it. It could be like I talked about earlier, like 4 weeks out, we're already doing a lot of reflecting on the positives. Or it could be like, hey, the check-in after the show where, hey, tell me about your show experience. Tell me a little bit about your season, things like that. And then I can give my feedback, my perspectives on what I've seen. But yeah, I think the positives is just like, if you think about it, the level of commitment, just taking that first step forward to say, I'm committing to something so extreme. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of people have never done that before in their life with anything. So to take on this huge endeavor, to actually go through the entire prep, regardless of where you place, there's only a certain few % of the population that's ever done something like this. So that in itself is super rewarding. I mean, that's empowering to know like, hey, I can actually take myself to some very dark places at times, persevere, and actually come out on top. It just makes a person that much stronger physically, mentally, and emotionally. And as crazy as my early preps were, like 6-week prep, losing 30 pounds, like that was the dumbest prep ever, but it taught me how to grind. had to persevere. Like it was 6-week hell in a sense. And I was like, let's do this again. Like I came out of it just like, hey, this was awesome. Let's do it again, even though it wasn't ideal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you can help your athletes come away from what is an unavoidably, at least to some degree, semi-traumatic experience, with being able to say, I overcame that, I survived that, I improved, and it wasn't as bad as it thought it would be, and I did better than I thought I could. Those are things that then push them forward to the next level, not only in the sport, but also in the rest of their lives. And I think more often than not, it's easy to help athletes to feel that and benefit from that in the context of the sport. Most people who compete more than once, it's because they get hooked on that. They get, oh my God, look at that. I have way more willpower than I ever thought. I can accomplish things. I've built this self-efficacy. And I see that, like you said, Jeff, this might be the first time I've ever overcome that level of adversity and then grown from it. I think what is more difficult, though, is making sure that that extends beyond the boundaries of the sport, that helps them as a person more broadly. And I think that's where a coach can really help. Some things that I've done when I see athletes who really find those blinders come on hard and fast and have a really narrow view, and sometimes they even have kind of a negative self-concept outside of the sport, is I ask them to start writing gratitude journals. And a very simple thing of write down 3 things that you're grateful for today. You know, it can be related to the sport, it doesn't have to be, but I find that it really asks them to step into a different headspace than they are at most of the time. And the goal is eventually for that not to be such a foreign headspace, so they can reflect more regularly and be grateful for things. But of course, it doesn't have to be that structured. That's just something that I've found is helpful and useful. That's been a go-to for me. I've never had a negative outcome from asking someone to start gratitude journaling, you know? So, but yeah, I 100% agree your point that it is highly individual, you know, what that looks like. I find some people are just really good at focusing on the positives. Other people really struggle with it a lot more. And I think that's something you just need to be attentive to as a coach for sure.
Yeah. I have one person in mind. He'll probably know when I start talking about him a little bit. But, you know, the very first time I started working with him, this was like 5-6 years ago. Like it was just a kid that, you know, was starting to lift weights, a little on the heavier side, you know, not real confident, you know, needed a lot more maturity, but going through now 2 contest preps, like just the level of maturity, more mentally and emotionally, is just far greater than the physical. And physically, obviously he won a couple pro cards, so he did really well, but just the mental aspect, and it's transcended outside of the sport, because now he has like a new job opportunity. He's moving state. Like there's a lot of confidence there for him to kind of do other things outside of just, hey, I'm a pretty good bodybuilder. So again, it's like sometimes we just like, even for me, like sometimes I just get really complacent. You know, I just kind of just stay in one spot, don't really challenge myself too much. It was when I first started 3D Muscle Journey, that little blog. Like that was a huge step, getting out of a comfort zone and putting myself in an uncomfortable position. And I had to learn to get comfortable. And here I am on a podcast where I was like, shit, I got to make this video on YouTube. Like that was just so foreign to me and uncomfortable. And even to this day, it's still a little uncomfortable to do these things, but I'm doing it. And I wouldn't have been able to get to where I'm at now if I just didn't really commit to something and challenge myself. So, I mean, contest prep can open a lot of doors outside of just like, hey, look at my physique, I'm shredded, or hey, I got a pro card, I'm a pro. Like there's a lot of other areas in life that it kind of relates to.
And that's actually a really common dynamic in competitors in my experience. A common thing is to be neurotic, a little OCD, focused on managing a lot of variables.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, this is bullshit. Yeah. And, you know, those of us with those tendencies, we also find, you know, it's easier for me to manage these variables and tick these marks and soothe my anxiety, because that's why we do it, right? If the people who will say, well, I track macros because I feel better when I track macros than when I don't, you know, that type of thing. and you can apply that to many other aspects of bodybuilding. It feels good to create a little nest of behaviors, right? To create the comfort zone, to operate within those boundaries. And ironically, while that's what allows you to succeed and be consistent and have adherence, is that structure, it's also very easy to get complacent, like you were saying, Jeff, and get stuck in that little bubble world. And I have seen many bodybuilders who the only place they really have any competence is within bodybuilding, because the rest of the world is too anxiety generating and they don't have the same control over that they do on bodybuilding. So I often challenge my competitors to try to find ways, and I start within bodybuilding because that's their comfort zone, right? Is to have a little less of that same very rigid structure and still get the same outcomes. I mean, and this has been exemplified by many different ways. Like if someone used to follow a really, really strict meal plan, let's try tracking macros. They find that they came a little bit outside of that little mouse hole and they didn't get eaten by the cat. Okay, now we can live in a slightly larger portion of the house, right? That a little more confidence occurs, a little less timidness, right? You can do the same thing with, let's not worry too much about meal frequency. And I want you to actually occasionally work in eating out and hit your macros. It's okay that you eyeball it. It'll be close enough if you make these certain decisions. They see they're still making progress. That extends like that. Hey, let's try some slightly more flexible programming options. We'll get X number of days done within X number amount of time. This will allow you to have a little more social life. Hey, it's okay if you go out, here's the way you would do that. You can be the designated driver. You can do this, et cetera. I mean, there's so many things that we've talked about on the 3DMJ podcast and in our articles and in my books, et cetera, to where you can take these very rigid systems that might be highly effective and not lose the effectiveness by just pushing the boundaries a little bit. It forces the athlete to learn some new skills, but that can be individualized. The pace at which those skills are learned can be dictated by their needs. I'm not forcing my athletes to do this. That's an important thing. The only thing that I'm doing is, first, I'm hopefully helping them acknowledge how their circle of comfort is maybe restrictively small, how there's things that are negatively affecting them, maybe inside or outside of bodybuilding, like they don't travel for a year, or their family's a little annoyed with them, or they feel distant. So how can we maybe reduce the friction there without losing the effectiveness in the prep? If I can get them to acknowledge that thing exists, like, yes, there are these friction points, then I go, okay, well, is that something you want to try changing? Sure. And then I can assess, like, to what degree of confidence they have of doing that. And then we start massaging each one of those friction points with different tools. And eventually they get to the point where they have a very different relationship. They might be the Jeff who is now on podcasts, or they might not. But any progress forward is great. For myself, for example, the challenges I've done is moving from like highly rigid structure in 2007 to, semi-rigid in 2009 to eventually in 2019 being able to travel to my shows, not even tracking macros for the first portion of it, and being able to really try to live my life to the fullest that I can while, still starving. And I was like, even if I hadn't necessarily looked as good as I did, and that's something I look back on, like, and thank you again, Jeff, for pointing this out, like, this is the best you ever looked. That's great. But I'm also really proud of the fact that I was able to still be a good supervisor to my students, still be a good husband, still get my work done for 3DMJ, and only piss off my colleagues a little bit more than normal. Maybe moderately more than normal, to be fair. But, I didn't have to shut off any avenues in my life to do the bodybuilding thing. And I think that's not the case for a lot of bodybuilders. It certainly wasn't for me in my first couple seasons. So helping an athlete do that starts with just getting them to acknowledge that there are those friction points, and then that perhaps there is benefits to not having such tight control over their comfort zone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think early on too, like a first timer, it's like it almost has to be a little more on the rigid side, but eventually, like the more you expose them to these things, it gets a little bit easier and a little bit more flexible. And currently, I haven't tracked anything yet. I haven't tracked my weight. I haven't tracked no macros. It's just I'm using all the experience, all those tools that I've collected for 35 years, and now I'm putting it to a test. It's like my new challenge. How far can I go to get in the best shape I can just using autoregulation? At some point I might stall out, and that's when it's like, okay, let me get a little more rigid again. But I mean, that's another element of getting myself out of the comfort zone. And like everything you described earlier was basically me in 2009. Like I was in a bubble in a sense, like trained the same way all the time, tracked my food the same way all the time, even handled my relationships the same all the time. And basically what you, Alberto, and Brad basically taught me was like, hey, let's bring some of those walls down. Like you're protecting yourself too much. Bring those walls down. Let's expose you to some new things. And it took some time, but eventually, like, I started seeing, like, yeah, okay, maybe doing a little more volume is beneficial. Or, hey, these refeeds are beneficial. Things like that, just little things that over time made a big difference to the end product. And then I actually started applying that to actually relationships outside of bodybuilding. And I was rewarded for it a little bit more so. So I became, in a sense, not just a better bodybuilder, but a better human. Yeah. So, of course, thank you guys for that. You guys already heard me say that millions of times, but I'll say it one more time.
Well, you're very welcome. And I think an important thing to acknowledge is that we never pushed you to do that. We planted seeds, we provided support. And that was something.
Don't believe this guy. They held my arms and legs down and tortured me until I said I would do more volume.
It was drips of water on the forehead. And if that didn't work, it was full on waterboarding. It was good times. It was simpler times when that was what you did with friends, But now the snowflake culture we have, you can't even torture your friends. No, but in all seriousness, I think, you stepped into that, Jeff, which was really cool. And I think for coaches who see these traits in your athletes, the natural tendency is just to point out why that's a problem and then tell them what to do to be more flexible. But that's really not the way it goes. So like, for example, in 2019, I did start tracking. It wasn't because I was objectively stalled. It was because as I pushed myself further and further and getting leaner, and as I was thinking about the impending shows and they had more meaning to me and I got excited, my anxiety crept in. And what made me feel better was tightening my circle of comfort, That's going to be natural. As you get more stressed, you will revert back to some of the behaviors that create that control that you kind of naturally want. The trick, though, is to acknowledge that. You don't have to intervene at that point. In fact, it is probably a bad idea. Like if Berto had been like, no, you can't track macros, right? You're doing fine. I would have been like, oh, great. Okay, coach. And I would have been stressed. Yeah. And it would have been worse. So the appropriate trade-off at that time for me was to then retreat a little bit to create that stability, because that stress would have come out in some other way. However, I can say now, and I actually said even then, that wasn't for better performance. I don't have a solid objective reason for this. This is for my own emotional comfort. I'm getting my Banky, and I'm going to sleep with it with my thumb in my mouth now, because things are getting too anxiety ridden for me. So I think be aware of that as a coach. When you encourage and you lead by example and you get your athletes to acknowledge those friction points and expand their comfort zones, and you're doing this by talking to them about what's happening beforehand and reflecting on this prep so it can be better the next time, that's all great. But be aware there will necessarily be points when they shift back. Because the reason why these behaviors are in place is because they are self-soothing. Because that's why we have habits. Like if someone's an emotional eater, you can't just be like, stop emotionally eating, right? Because they're eating in response to an emotion. So what are they going to do in response to that emotion if you tell them not to eat? Nothing is not a solution. Something is going to occur. So that's the same thing. As you get your athletes to expand their horizon and operate in a more flexible manner, understand there will be times when they regress to being more rigid. But the goal is that if you step back far enough and you look at that graph, that it's still moving upwards towards having a better relationship with the sport and having more flexibility.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Oh, you stop it.
You dropping that mic or what?
I if I didn't want to damage it, I would. But unfortunately, this mic is too valuable. Brandon would kill me if I dropped it, so we can't do that. But I will say, I think to wrap it up, because I think we've covered a lot of ground, Jeff, I would say have a checklist for yourself if you're self-coached, or for your athletes generally if you're coaching them. You don't want athletes to be surprised by what they're going into. They should know about the show format. They should know about your plans for postseason and the recovery diet. They should know about the peak week strategy and likely the time course, like how much longer you're going to push. How long is this pushing phase going to be? When are we taking our foot off the gas pedal? They should understand what potential pitfalls should occur, and they should understand what we don't want to do when those pitfalls happen and how we do respond to them. You want to give them more than just binary options, not just follow the plan or bad, but follow the plan. And if X, Y, or Z happens, we do, A, B, or C, right?
Right.
And then also just be aware of your athlete's head state. And when they are becoming slightly more narrow, and the death of 1,000 cuts as they go from week 1 to week 24 in that prep, and they stop talking about some of the things that seem to be key components to their life and personality before, so you can help make them aware of that. So I think that's the stuff I wanted to summarize. Jeff, anything you want to add?
I just want to add, encourage a feedback loop to make sure that, they are communicating, because oftentimes, the communication will become less as that prep goes down. So you have to be inquisitive as a coach too. You have to ask questions, how they're feeling, anything that's going on. I mean, just get them to open up and talk, because how can you coach if you don't know exactly where they're at, internally? Like, you can look at numbers all day, but you need to know how your athletes are actually ticking in order for you to be an effective coach.
That is such a really important final point to make, Jeff, because I think sometimes, like, especially if you're used to working with a lot of off-season or gen pop or like powerlifting athletes, like when you get not a lot of information, you kind of just assume, oh, they figured out RPE, they like the training, things are going well, like weight is going in the right direction, everything's good to go. Like, they don't have a lot to say because they don't need a lot of help right now. That's not the case during contest prep as it gets deeper and deeper. That might just be them locking down because they're so ridden with anxiety, or there's things they don't want to say to you, or they don't know if it's okay to say to you, or they don't know it's your purview, but they're struggling with it. Like, man, first-time competitors don't know just how pervasive the effects of contest prep can be. Do they want to talk to you about the fact that they're struggling to be intimate with their partner? Maybe not, but if you let them know that's okay, then at least then they can opt in if that is something they want to talk about. So anyway, I just want to reiterate what Jeff said. That's an incredible final point, is that everything we've talked about to this point is completely hinged on the fact that you do have good, ongoing, honest, consistent communication. So that's a really good point. Thank you for adding that, Jeff.
No problem. You're more welcome. I learned a lot, actually. I got some takeaways from this one that I get to apply myself. So here I am, end of the game, 35 years, and still learning.
Always learning, folks. Well, thank you for tuning in, Jeff. I also learned things. Oh, I appreciate it. I try. So, you know what? This is a win for me because Jeff just called me cute. So with that, we're going to leave it. We're going to sign off. Thank you for joining us, and best of luck. And don't forget to reflect on the positives of prep. What's going on, 3DMJers? Eric Helms here. Thanks for listening to our podcast. I just want to take a second to tell you about MASS, Monthly Applications in Strength Sport. This is a monthly research review that I put out with Greg Nuckols, Dr. Mike Zerdos, and Dr. Eric Trexler. We cover the most up-to-date, peer-reviewed research in the world of strength and physique sport that's directly relevant to your practice as a coach or an athlete. We provide our reviews in written format, but also, since you enjoy our podcast, in audio roundtable reviews where we discuss the research in depth. Finally, we also do video concept reviews where we cover a broader topic in video format for your learning. For fitness professionals, you can take quizzes on MASS content and earn continuing education credits for most of the biggest certifying bodies in the fitness industry. If you want to sign up and get a subscription, head over to 3dmusclejourney.com and click on the Products tab. Thanks for your time, and thanks for listening.